When the fire starts to glow, hidden stories start to grow. Take a breath, stay a while. Every mystery leaves a trail. Welcome to Paranormal Stories and Coffee.
Welcome to Paranormal Stories and Coffee. Grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get comfortable. Tonight's stories come from the oldest mountains in North America, where some say the forest remembers every footstep, and not everything out there wants to be found. Whether these stories are folklore, local legend, or something in between, I'll let you decide. There are hundreds of cabins tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains. Most have stood for generations, and almost every family has at least one story they'll only tell after dark. This one came from an elderly woman in western North Carolina. She said it happened to her grandparents in the winter of 1958. Thomas and Eleanor had inherited a small hunting cabin from Thomas's grandfather. Before handing over the keys, his grandfather gave them one piece of advice. If someone knocks 3 times after midnight, don't answer. Thomas laughed. Grandpa always had a flair for stories. The old man didn't smile. I'm not telling you a story. Their first 2 nights were quiet. The cabin was exactly what they'd hoped for. A warm fire, fresh snow, nothing but forest for miles. On the 3rd night, Eleanor woke first. Knock. A single knock echoed through the cabin. Thomas opened one eye. Probably a branch. Silence. Then, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks, not loud, not hurried, perfectly spaced apart. Thomas threw back the blanket. Someone's out there. He reached for the doorknob. Eleanor grabbed his wrist. Don't. He laughed. It could be someone who needs help. She looked at him. Then why haven't they said anything? The cabin fell silent again. Thomas waited. Nothing. He relaxed. Then, boom. The entire front door shook. Not a knock. A violent impact. Another. Boom. The windows rattled. The dishes inside the cabinets clinked together. Something struck the door again, hard enough to make dust fall from the ceiling. Thomas instinctively reached for the lock. Even though it was already locked, Eleanor whispered, "Don't make a sound." For nearly a minute, whatever was outside slammed against the door. Then it stopped, completely. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing, just the sound of rain. Neither of them slept. They sat by the dying fire until dawn. When the first light crept through the windows, Thomas finally opened the door. No footprints. Not in the mud, not in the wet leaves. Nothing. But across the old wooden door were 5 enormous handprints, each one much larger than a man's hand. The fingers were impossibly long, as though whatever had pressed against the door had one extra joint in every finger. Running from the handle to the bottom of the door were 4 deep grooves, not scratches. Grooves. The wood had been peeled away. Thomas ran his fingers through one of them. It was nearly half an inch deep. Neither of them spoke. They packed before noon. The cabin still stands today. Locals say it's been bought and sold several times. No family has stayed longer than a few months. Some blame the isolation. Others blame the weather. The woman who told me this simply smiled, stirred her coffee, and said, "Whatever knocked that night was polite enough to ask first. Most things aren't." Story 2. The Voice in the Trees. There are old rules in the mountains that people don't question. Don't whistle after dark. Don't wander off the trail. And if you hear someone calling your name from the woods, no, you didn't. 5 friends decide to spend a weekend camping deep in the Appalachian Mountains. They hike nearly 6 miles before reaching a quiet clearing beside a creek. No cell service, no roads. Exactly what they wanted. As the sun begins to set, they gather around the fire. One of them, Ben, jokes, "If Bigfoot shows up, I'm getting a selfie." Everyone laughs, except for the oldest camper. Mark had spent years hiking those mountains. He simply says, "If you hear your name tonight, don't answer." The group assumes he's joking. He isn't smiling. Around midnight, the fire burns low. Most of the group has gone to bed. Only Mark remains awake, quietly feeding another log into the fire. That's when he hears it. A woman's voice. Soft, barely louder than the wind. Mark. He freezes. The voice sounds exactly like his wife. The problem: his wife is 300 miles away. He slowly looks toward the dark tree line. Nothing. The voice comes again, a little closer. Mark. He doesn't answer. Instead, he quietly zips his tent shut and wakes the others. The group is confused. Ben laughs. You're scared of an owl? Mark doesn't respond. Instead, he asks everyone a question. Is everybody here? They count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone is there. Then, from somewhere beyond the trees, Ben hears his own voice. Guys. Every head turns toward him. He's standing beside them. No one says a word. The voice comes again, this time closer. Guys. It sounds exactly like him. Every laugh, every inflection, perfect. One of the girls whispers, "What is that?" Mark quietly answers, "Don't let it know you're listening." The forest becomes completely silent. No insects, no frogs, no wind. Even the creek seems quieter. Then, different voices begin calling, one after another, a mother, a brother, a little girl laughing, someone crying for help. Each voice belongs to someone the campers know, every one of them. Coming from the woods, the youngest camper begins walking toward the trees. His mother's voice is calling him. Mark grabs his backpack and throws him to the ground. Hard. The young man is furious, until he looks up, standing just inside the trees. Something steps from behind a pine, not enough to reveal itself, just enough that they know. Something is standing there, watching. Then it slowly leans sideways, as if trying to see around the tree, without ever taking another step. Nobody sleeps. They leave before sunrise. The drive home is completely silent. Months later, Ben receives a voicemail. No caller ID. The recording lasts only 7 seconds. It begins with static. Then, someone quietly says, "Guys," in his own voice. The voicemail contains no date, no number. It has never been deleted. Some people say the mountains echo your voice. Others say something else learned it. Story 3. The Hunter Who Never Hunted Again. Old hunters in Appalachia have a saying, if the forest suddenly goes quiet, leave. Don't wait to find out why. This story came from a retired game warden in eastern Kentucky. He told me there was only one hunter he'd ever met who voluntarily gave up hunting. Not because of age, not because of injury, but because of one morning deep in the mountains. Frank had hunted the Appalachians for over 40 years. He knew every trail, every creek, every animal. People often joke that there wasn't a bear alive that could sneak up on Frank. He'd laugh. Animals don't scare me. Late one October morning, he spotted fresh deer tracks. Perfect. He followed them for nearly an hour. The deeper he walked, the quieter the woods became. No birds, no squirrels, even the wind had stopped. He looked around. Something felt wrong. He found the deer. It was lying perfectly still in the middle of a clearing. No blood, no wounds, no sign of a struggle. Its eyes were wide open, almost frozen in fear. Frank knelt beside it, still warm. It had died only minutes earlier. Then he noticed. Every tree around the clearing had bark stripped away, about 8 feet from the ground. Not claw marks, not antlers, as if something had dragged its hands around every tree. He stood. That's when he heard it. Not a growl, not footsteps. Breathing, heavy, slow, behind him. Frank slowly reached for his rifle. The breathing stopped. He turned. Nothing. Just trees. He looked forward again. The deer was gone. There wasn't enough time. No sound, no drag marks, nothing. The clearing was empty. Then, movement. About 50 yards away, between two enormous pines, something stood up, not from behind a tree, from the ground, as though it had been crouching there, watching him the entire time. Frank would later tell the ranger, "It wasn't how big it was how quietly something that big could move." The figure never stepped closer, it simply watched. Then, it slowly tilted its head, almost curious. Frank backed away, never taking his eyes off it. When he reached the trail, he turned, for just a second. The clearing was empty. The figure was gone. He looked back toward the trail, standing, 10 feet away. It had somehow reached the trail before he had, still silent, still watching. Then, it stepped backward, into the trees, without turning around, as if the forest swallowed it. Frank never hunted again. He sold every rifle he owned. When people asked why, he always gave the same answer. "I realized that day I was the one being watched. It knew I was there before I knew it existed." Some hunters say every mountain has a king. Frank believed he met his. Story 4. Never leave the trail. There's an old saying in Appalachia, children see things adults have forgotten how to see. That's why if a child starts talking to someone you can't see, you don't ask who they're talking to, you leave. An older couple from eastern Tennessee shared this story with me many years ago. It wasn't their story, it belonged to their son and his family. They refused to hike that trail ever again. It was one of those beautiful October afternoons that makes you forget how quickly the mountains can change. Golden leaves drifted lazily through the air. Sunlight filtered through towering oaks and maples, painting the trail in warm shades of amber and gold. The forest smelled of damp earth and pine. 8-year-old Emma skipped happily ahead, stopping every few minutes to collect unusual leaves or smooth river stones she insisted were lucky. Her father laughed. "You're going to fill that backpack before we make it halfway." Emma smiled. "I'm saving them." "For who?" She shrugged. "My new friend." Her parents smiled at each other. Imaginary friends weren't unusual. About an hour into the hike, the forest changed. Not dramatically, subtly. The birds stopped singing. The breeze disappeared. Even the leaves seemed still. Emma stopped walking. She stared into the trees, long enough that her mother finally asked, "Everything okay?" Emma nodded slowly, then pointed. "She lives over there." Her father looked. Nothing but thick forest. "Who's she?" Emma smiled. "The little girl." They continued hiking, trying not to make a big deal of it. Every few minutes, Emma would quietly wave into the woods. Sometimes she'd smile. Sometimes she'd nod, as if someone were speaking to her. Her mother finally asked, "What's she saying?" Emma answered without hesitation. "She says she likes my yellow jacket." The mother's smile faded. Emma hadn't been wearing the yellow jacket when they left home. She'd taken it out of the backpack only 10 minutes earlier. Clouds rolled over the mountains much faster than expected. The sunlight dimmed. Fog began slipping silently between the trees. Emma stopped again. This time, she looked frightened. Her father knelt beside her. "Sweetheart?" She whispered, "She wants me to come play." Her mother immediately took her hand. "What did you tell her?" Emma looked confused. "Nothing. She said I don't have to answer." The parents exchanged a glance. Neither of them said a word. The father quietly picked Emma up. "We're heading back." Emma looked over his shoulder toward the woods. She waved, then frowned. Her mother asked, "What's wrong?" Emma whispered, "She's crying." Nobody spoke. The farther they walked, the heavier the silence became. No birds, no insects, no squirrels. Only their footsteps. About halfway back, Emma suddenly giggled. Her father froze. "What?" Emma smiled. "She says you're walking the wrong way." The father looked ahead. The trail didn't look familiar anymore. The same fallen tree appeared twice. The same boulder 3 times. His wife quietly squeezed his hand. Neither of them admitted it, but both had noticed. The trail seemed longer. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the parking lot. Only one car remained. Theirs. Emma looked toward the tree line one last time. She smiled and waved. The father asked, "Is she still there?" Emma nodded, then said something that neither parent ever forgot. "No." Pause. "She can't leave the trees." Years passed. Emma never mentioned the little girl again. One afternoon, while cleaning old vacation photos, her father found a picture from that hike. Emma stood on the trail, smiling, holding her hand out, as if someone were standing beside her. He zoomed in. Emma's little hand wasn't empty. It looked like tiny fingers were wrapped around it. He closed the photo, never looked at it again. Some people believe children imagine things. Others believe children remember how to see. Final story: The Deer That Watched. People who've lived in the Appalachian Mountains for generations have an old saying: if a deer watches you, watch it back. If it doesn't blink, leave. This story came from a retired park ranger who spent almost 30 years patrolling remote trails in the Appalachians. When I asked him if he'd ever seen anything he couldn't explain, he smiled for a long time before answering. "I have seen plenty of things I couldn't explain," he said, "but there's only one thing I hope I never see again." It was late November. The sun had already slipped behind the mountains, leaving only a deep blue twilight hanging over the winding roads. A married couple, David and Claire, were driving home after spending the day photographing waterfalls. The road twisted endlessly through the forest. The radio crackled with static. Then, silence. No stations. Just the hum of the tires. Claire looked out her window. There, standing just off the shoulder, a large buck, perfectly still. Its antlers stretched wide. It didn't flinch as the headlights swept across it. It simply watched them pass. David smiled. Beautiful. Claire didn't answer. Something about it made her uneasy. 10 minutes later, another deer, standing in the exact same position, head slightly lowered, facing the road, watching. Again, it didn't run, didn't eat, didn't even move its ears. David slowed. "That's strange." Claire whispered, "Keep driving." A few miles later, they reached a scenic overlook. The mountains disappeared into rolling fog below. David stepped out to stretch. Claire stayed beside the car. The forest was silent. Not peaceful. Silent. David noticed movement. Another deer, standing between two old oak trees. Its body was perfectly still. Its eyes never left him. He raised his camera. Just before he pressed the shutter, the deer tilted its head. Not naturally, slowly, almost curiously. Too far. Farther than it should have been able to. He lowered the camera. Something deep inside him whispered, "Leave." As David backed toward the car, the deer took one slow step forward, then another. Its movements weren't graceful. They were carefully practiced, as if something had learned how deer walk by watching them. Claire gasped, "David!" Without taking her eyes off it. Its mouth. He looked. The deer's lips were pulled back, not aggressively, not like a warning, almost like it was trying to smile. They jumped into the car. David started the engine. They sped down the mountain road. No one spoke. 5 miles later, Claire looked into the side mirror. It isn't there anymore. David finally exhaled. Then, the headlights rounded another bend. Standing in the middle of the road was the same deer, waiting. Neither of them understood how. There hadn't been another road, no trail, no possible way it could have gotten ahead of them. David slammed on the brakes. The deer didn't move. Instead, it slowly turned and walked into the woods. Only, its back legs moved first. Its front legs followed a second later, almost as though it had to remember how. The next morning, they reported the encounter to a local park ranger. He listened quietly, never interrupted. When they finished, he asked one question. "Did it blink?" Claire looked confused. "No." The ranger nodded. He stared out the window for a long moment. then quietly said, "Good." David frowned. "Good?" The ranger stood, locked the office door, then looked directly at them. "Because if it had, it would have recognized you." The ranger refused to explain what he meant. He simply advised them not to drive those mountain roads after sunset again. Years later, David still refuses to photograph deer. Claire says she still checks everyone she sees, not for antlers, not for size. She watches, the eyes, waiting for a blink that always comes. Most deer will run when they see you. The ones that don't might not be deer. The Appalachian Mountains have stood for hundreds of millions of years, long before us, and they'll remain long after we're gone. Maybe the stories are only legends, or maybe legends begin with someone telling the truth. Thank you for spending part of your evening with me. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, please like, subscribe, and join me for the next cup of coffee. Until then, lock your doors, stay close to the fire, and if something in the woods calls your name, make sure everyone is still standing beside you. Good night.